Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cultured Poll List. I'm Mike. This week we decided to not record a new episode due to the holidays, so I decided to reissue, re upload, whatever you want to call it, my episode with my former co host Luke from season 2 on The Last Ronin, given the recent news that Paramount decided to shelve the Last Ronin live action movie, which is a bummer in my book. So if you didn't catch this episode when it first came out a couple years ago on the old channel, now's your chance, and I really hope you enjoy it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. If you haven't checked out our last couple episodes, Luke is not able to join over video due to some technical issues he's dealing with. So I'm on my own during the summary portion of the show, but he does join via voice for the review portion so we can kind of actually discuss it. But anyway, The Last Ronin. I've been meaning to check out this book for a while, and then the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie came out, and then a couple weeks ago, there was an official teaser for The Last Ronin game that's supposed to be coming out. So I figured, might as well check it out now. This has actually came out a lot more recently than I thought. The last issue just came out last year. So yeah, a little more recent than I thought. But anyway, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin is written by Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird, and Tom Waltz. The artists are Isa Escorza, Isaac Escorza, Ben Bishop, Kevin Eastman. The colors are by Luis Antonio Delgado. The letterer is Sean Lee. So, our story begins in a futuristic dystopian version of New York City. The city is run by the Foot Clan and its leader. So, we're first introduced to the last remaining Ninja Turtle. All the other three are dead, and we're not quite sure who it is yet. He manages to sneak past all of the border security of New York City, and he ends up in the lower level of the city. There are a few different levels, and he's trying to get to the main tower where the leader of the Foot. So on his way over there, he steals a bike from some girl who ends up not being too happy about it, unsurprisingly. And he uses the bike to basically cause an explosion and launch himself further upwards into the next level of the city, where he is greeted by these foot robot soldiers, and he's able to take one of them out, and he soon realizes that they're actually cyborgs, basically people turned into these like robotic foot soldiers, created by Baxter Stockman, and he is understandably disturbed. He is quickly surrounded and attacked by more foot soldiers, foot police officers, whatever you want to call them. And he runs away, steals a police flying car, and manages to escape after quite a bit of effort, and continues to make his way to the tower. And we then cut to the tower and see Oroku Hiroto, who is the leader of the Foot clan currently and the dictator of New York City. And he is also Shredder's grandson. So, our last remaining turtle continues his journey to the tower. He makes it into the bottommost garage and decides to just use a full frontal assault, fights his way up to the top of the tower, and confronts Hiroto. But he is soon attacked and taken off guard by these robots that attack him. These mousers is what he calls them. And a large robot tackles him, and they both tumble out the tower window, falling all the way to the ground. And he thinks he's going to die. I'm just going to call him the Ronin at this point. He thinks he's going to die, but he lands on the concrete and actually manages to survive, much to his surprise, though he is greatly injured. and he manages to peel himself off the concrete and escape down a manhole into the sewers. And the girl that he stole the motorcycle from actually follows him. And we cut back to Hiroto, who is mad that the Ronin escaped, and we also see that he's keeping his mother in like this cryo chamber. So then we cut back to the Ronin. He's in the sewer and feels like he has failed. He thinks he's dying from falling out of the tower, and we see that he has all of the weapons of all four turtles, and we're still not sure which turtle he is yet. And he is going to kill himself at this point to save his honor, but before he can, he passes out, and the girl he stole the bike from actually finds him, and we do see him kind of flatline, and it seems like this is some kind of a glimpse into the afterlife, and he sees his brothers. But then he wakes up in a hospital bed, though he's not actually in a hospital, and he's being taken care of by April O'Neil, who he is surprised to see. And she calls him Michelangelo, so we do know that the Last Ronin is indeed Michelangelo. So then we see a flashback. April O'Neil and Casey Jones waiting for the Turtles to show up for dinner to celebrate their engagement, when Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo bring in an injured Splinter who had been attacked by the Foot. And before we see the end of this flashback, we cut back to present day April O'Neil waking up, and we see that whatever happened to the Turtles, that April survived, took her arm and her leg, and she has robotic limbs now. And then we see Michelangelo in the kitchen making tea, and we see him talking to his brothers in his mind, which has been going on this whole comic, off and on. And then we see the rest of the flashback where Raphael leaves and attacks the Foot Clan leader, Shredder's daughter, to get vengeance for them killing Splinter. And he's able to take out a bunch of them, and he actually manages to kill the leader of the Foot, but Raphael himself is also killed. So then we cut back to present day. Michelangelo and April are talking, catching up a bit, and April introduces Michelangelo to her daughter, Casey Marie, who is actually the girl that Michelangelo stole the motorcycle from at the beginning, and she found Mikey in this sewer. Then we see Hiroto telling his men to double their efforts to find Michelangelo, and he shows what happened to the last captain that failed him, so that's nice. He's a nice fellow. Then we see Casey and Michelangelo talking about Casey's study of martial arts, and Mikey explains to her kind of some of the stuff that happened to him in between when his brothers died and now. He tried to live a normal life in Japan, but he was attacked at some point by these hoodlums, and he beats them up, and that kind of reminds him that he still feels like he needs to avenge his dead family members. And he ends up spending years mastering like pretty much every martial art there is. And then he comes back to New York, and that's where we're at. And Casey Marie sees this journal that Splinter had left for him that has a bunch of information on martial arts as well as just general like life advice. But Michelangelo had written in the back no peace as a reminder that until he gets vengeance for his brothers and father, that he will know no peace. Then we see Hiroto addressing the people of New York, telling them that New York is going under martial law, basically, until they find Michelangelo. And then we see Michelangelo sitting in his room, kind of having a conversation in his head with his dead brothers. And they're trying to convince him that he shouldn't let Casey help him in his war, and that she's just a teenager. And he says, like, well, we were teenagers when we did our thing. And he does say he does want to try and make sure she doesn't get hurt, but, he doesn't think he can necessarily stop her if she wants to. So then Michelangelo goes to April and meets up with April in her lab, and we see that she has the head of Fugitoid. And this prompts another flashback where we see this is several years after Raphael and Shredder's daughter's death, and Shredder's grandson has now taken over the Foot Clan, and he's trying to start he's trying to broker peace between the Turtles and their group and himself. So, but this is going to take place in Japan with Splinter's clan back in Japan. So Splinter and Donatello are heading to Japan to enact the peace talks, while the rest of the Turtles and Casey and April and all their allies stay in New York. As Donatello and Splinter leave, Baxter Stockman sends a bunch of Foot Clan soldiers as well as some of his own robotic adversaries to attack the Turtles in their home base. And the Fugitoid, aka I think his name is Professor Honeycutt, is almost killed, but Michelangelo saves him. And Baxter Stockman, as a last ditch effort, ends up sending in a bunch of his robots called Mousers to go collect Fugitoid, but Fugitoid threatens to self-destruct himself, so Stockman ends up just activating the self-destruct sequence in his own robots, which explodes the whole building and kills everyone inside except for April, and the Fugitoid's head is still intact. So then we cut to present day. Casey Marie is hanging out with her allies, her friends, and she was trying to collect them to help them join Michelangelo in their cause, but she sees that martial law is being enacted and cracking down on all the citizens, and she realizes that they don't really have much time to act, so she tries to go back home, but she ends up saving an old lady being harassed by a foot officer. But she still heads back home to the sewer lair. And then we see April O'Neil running some tests on Michelangelo, and it's kind of vaguely explained that whatever mutation that caused, them to be mutants, the Turtles be mutants in the first place, seems to be progressing as he ages, and seems to make him stronger and more durable, and that's how he was able to survive falling from that tower at the beginning of the book. April also explains during this exchange how she survived, or at least Michelangelo shoved her and the Fugitoid into a separate room before the explosion, but they were still caught in the blast, so only the Fugitoid's head survived, and April survived, but she lost her arm and her leg, and she woke up in the hospital weeks after, or 1 week after the explosion, and found out, she lost her limbs and that her husband was dead, and she was also pregnant, which she didn't realize. So when she eventually leaves the hospital after giving birth and going through a bunch of mental and physical therapy, she has some new legs, but now she has to strike it out on her own and raise her child. And Michelangelo explains to April what happened to him right after the explosion, that he survived, and as soon as he saw what happened, he realized everyone had died in the building, he immediately grabbed his gear and stowed away on a plane to Japan to try and find Donatello and Splinter. But before he can finish his story, he's interrupted by Casey Marie, who shows up with her friends, and they reveal that martial law is being enacted, and they need to act now. And then we cut to Hiroto, who this scene basically just shows him being a psycho and jumping off a building and saying he's God, and then he's saved by his robots, and it's kind of interesting, I guess. Then we cut back to Michelangelo and April and Casey, and April says she has this plan to storm Baxter Stockman's island. I believe he's given Liberty Island as his base, and because Stockman designed all of the robots that Hiroto uses, as well as the foot cyborg officers. So if they can break into the island and use the the Fugitoid's head kind of reanimate it and take over Stockman's tech, then they can beat Hiroto. And Michelangelo doesn't like the idea of a frontal assault, but April shows him this beefy tank that she made. So then we do a bit of a jump, I guess probably like a couple days later, a couple weeks later, during the actual assault. And it's looking kind of hairy, but not quite as hairy as frickin' Baxter Stockman. God damn, look at it, look at that face. Not even a mother could love that. And then we kind of jump back a couple weeks, and Casey is training, but Michelangelo basically insults her technique and tells her to attack him. Kind of the classic, like, oh, you think you can beat me? Well, then attack me. And she managed. She doesn't really do very well. Because she hasn't actually had much of an actual formal training. But Michelangelo says he will train her, which April is actually pretty cool with. And during this scene, Michelangelo finishes his story. When he got to Japan and went to the Hamato clan, which is Splinter's, I think the clan that Splinter came from, he's met with the leader of the Hamato clan, who explains that he went with Splinter and Donatello to meet with Hiroto and his men, but they were double-crossed pretty quick. It turned out it wasn't actually a peace talk, it was a trap. And Splinter and Donatello are able to kick some pretty good ass at first, but soon they're overwhelmed by the archers and are shot to death. And after hearing this horrible news, Michelangelo just starts walking in the mountains and in kind of a mental fog. And he does mention that, he thought he would probably die up there at some point, it being super cold and him being cold-blooded, where he can't really regulate his internal temperature very well, but somehow his mutation kept him alive. So that was kind of like the first inkling that his mutation is changing and keeping him alive. And Michelangelo then confronts April and says that he knows that Casey Marie has superhuman abilities, and it turns out that April and Casey's exposure to the turtles for so many years, somehow they were affected by the mutagens that mutated the turtles, and that caused Casey Marie to be born with superhuman strength and durability, which is pretty interesting. But April doesn't want Michelangelo to tell Casey Marie. So then there's a scene that's kind of intercut between the battle at Liberty Island and them planning the actual attack, but I'm not going to go into all the details, really. They attacked, basically, from different fronts, and it doesn't seem like it's going too great at first, because, it's a full frontal assault, and they're just kind of being pushed back. And then we quickly see Hiroto hearing about all the explosions on the island, and he has his men go there to check it out. But right in the nick of time, April shows up in her big old tank, and they end up breaking into Baxter Stockman's fortress. April is able to reanimate the Fugitoid's head, and Baxter Stockman does try to stop her, but all the power in the facility that is absorbed by the Fugitoid is used by the Fugitoid to kill Stockman. And then we see that the Fugitoid has control over all of Stockman's tech at this point, all of his nanobots. And he is able to deactivate pretty much all of the Stockman technology that Hiroto has been using. So now he's pretty handicapped. Next, we cut to Michelangelo after the battle, and he is preparing to go off on his own to face Hiroto, and he is confronted. He kind of has an argument with his dead brothers in his head, and there is this kind of interesting scene where he says leave and never come back, and he basically has a Gollum moment, which is fun.
Leave now and never come back.
But he then leaves. He writes something in the journal and leaves it behind for Casey Marie, and then goes to face Hiroto. So then we see Casey out with the other freedom fighters, and they see that since all the security has now been deactivated. People are rioting. And we see Hiroto freaking out about this, really mad that Stockman got taken out. And he tells his men to prepare his armor. And we see Michelangelo preparing to attack the tower. Casey Marie goes back and confronts her mom about her powers, as well as asking where Michelangelo is. And April says, like, my Michelangelo already left. I didn't realize it, but he slipped away. But he left, this journal for you. Then we cut to Michelangelo, who has fought his way, or I should say, slaughtered his way up to the top of the tower almost, through some robot android adversaries, as well as some Foot Clan adversaries. And he finally gets to the top and is confronted, or he confronts Hiroto, who has this really pretty badass liquid metal, like shredder armor. And Hiroto does reveal that he basically just kept his mom alive so that he could gloat over his success, I guess, because he's mad at her for dying all those years ago and leaving him alone to pick up the pieces of the Foot Clan. So Michelangelo and Shredder Jr. Begin fighting. The fight takes them outside the tower, falling through the air. It's pretty cool, honestly. And but he is eventually able to catch Shredder Jr., Hiroto off guard when his entire tower is blown up by explosives that Michelangelo set. And Michelangelo is able to knock him off balance and throw him off the top of a building, which does significantly damage his armor. But the fight still rages on and ends up going down into the sewer, which is now being flooded because of the deactivated Stockman tech. So April is trying to open the pumps in the sewer, but they're like really old and degraded, and it's taking a while. But she and Casey Marie are able to activate the pumps and stop the flooding of the sewer. This pushes Michelangelo and Hiroto out of the sewer into the, I'm guessing like the East River or something, out into the water, and they have a final slugfest. Michelangelo basically beats Hiroto to a pulp, but in a last-ditch effort, Hiroto uses his suit to electrify them both, but only Michelangelo survives the encounter, but not for much longer. He is able to give some last words of advice to Casey Marie and shows her the final page of Splinter's journal, which instead of saying no peace, N-O peace, it now says K-N-O-W peace. He says that's his most important lesson to teach her. And we see Michelangelo showing up in what seems like the afterlife. Kind of a glimpse of what we saw earlier, but now we get to see the whole scene play out, and he's reunited with his brothers like back in the old days, and along with Casey and Splinter. And that is pretty much the end. There is a bit of an epilogue that shows Casey Marie and April doing their thing, and we see these 4 turtles, and Casey is talking to them directly, and it seems like they are going to be trying to mutate these turtles, I guess, and make some more Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I guess. And there is a to be continued tag, so it seems like the writers do have more planned for this story, which could be pretty cool. Could be pretty interesting. I'm curious to see what happens next. So, Luke, I'm assuming this is your first time reading this. I know it was mine.
Yes, it was my first time reading this. Although I did, in middle school, I was a big fan of the Ninja Turtles, and so I did read some of the
Okay.
original Eastman and Laird comics at that point, and so I was kind of familiar with their style of comics, but I've never read this one specifically.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you like what your relationship with the turtles was before we read this. Yeah, I like for me it's mostly the like early 2000s series,
Okay.
um the cartoon, and then the like 2007 3D animated movie that I'm most
Yeah, I saw
familiar
that
with.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and even the cartoon, I only watched it when I went over to my friend's house because he was like super into like GI
Mm,
Joe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like all that stuff. So I pretty much watched that when I was over at his place. So
okay.
I'm not like I was never super familiar, but I like knew enough about them, and they were like everywhere, and the toys were everywhere, you know.
Right, right.
But I'd never read the comics or anything, so this was the first comic I've read of
Mm,
TMNT. Um,
okay.
but oh well, yeah, and I've seen the live action movies, for better or
Yeah.
for worse. Um, but what did you think of the Last Ronin?
I really liked it. It was because for those of you who don't know, the Ninja Turtles started out famously it was a parody of Daredevil, but
Right.
tonally I like to compare it to like The Boys, where it's like
Yeah.
super dark and violent and like kind of also kind of funny.
Sure.
And so this I mean and since then there's obviously the cartoon and it's been watered down a lot for
Yeah.
marketing and for children and all that. But I feel like this is very much a callback to that original
Hmm.
the darker
Yeah.
still kind of comedic kind of tone that they were originally.
Yeah, this was definitely a lot more violent than like
Yes.
your average comic book. It's definitely more for
Mhm.
adults. Which is
Right.
kind of funny when you think about it as like a giant ninja turtle and it's more adult centered, but you know,
Right.
it definitely works though. Um,
Yes.
Especially with fans, you know, who have been fans of the turtles since they were kids, you know. But
Mhm.
I think this is like the first comic we've covered on this podcast that isn't like Marvel or DC or Image, you know, or like one of the big comic publishers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so this was fun, and yeah, this was written by the original um
Mhm.
creators, but I was kind of familiar with the storyline of this like going into it. I
Yeah.
knew that
Yeah.
you know, there was only it was like set in the future, and there was only one of the turtles left. But for some reason, I kind of assumed it was Raph
Oh,
before.
okay.
I think my friend told me it was Michelangelo. Um,
Mhm.
uh, just a little while ago, actually, and I thought that was actually kind of a cool idea. Because on
Yeah.
paper you would think it would be, you know, like either Leo or Raph that survived,
Yeah.
but having
Yeah.
the more like lighthearted and like clown of the group be the one who ends up being, you know, the one that survives and becomes kind of a jaded character is a fun twist, I think.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And also just like having April survive as well was interesting.
Mm.
She almost kind of reminded me, the way she was portrayed reminded me a bit of Sarah Connor, especially
Yeah, for
like
sure.
in like Dark Fate or like one of the later Terminator movies. um
Mhm.
and I thought it was cool that they had a kid. And I think what one of the most interesting aspects of this book to me that I wasn't expecting, I wish they had explained a little more, was how the mutation changed
Oh, yeah.
Michelangelo. Like he didn't really know exactly why, and April was trying to study it, but they never really said much
Mm.
more like what it would do to him eventually, because it seemed like, as you know, as he was getting older, his mutation was making him like stronger and more durable.
Right, right.
And like that kind of makes me wonder like if it would keep changing him until, like, you know, he died or like became immortal or something, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's even a part where he says that, you know, he was out in the on a cold mountaintop, but you know, he thought he would die because he was cold-blooded, but his mutation kept him alive. So I'm kind of
Right.
wondering if at a certain point, you know, outside of being like, you know, stabbed to death or something, if he could just like keep surviving with his mutation, you know.
Right. Right.
And I thought it was interesting how uh Casey, April's daughter, had a
Mm.
mutation. She's a mutant technically, and has
Yes.
like enhanced strength and everything. That was kind of an interesting twist. I wasn't really expecting that, but that was kind of an interesting thing to put in there.
Right. Yeah, Casey Marie, yeah.
You know, I think they did a good job revealing a little piece of what happened at a time.
Yeah,
You know, they
yeah,
they didn't just come right out and say like, "Well, here's the whole story. Have a seat," you know, and it was even kind of revealed by different people. A little bit
yeah,
like Michelangelo told part of his story, then he told another part. April told her part, you know, and I
yeah,
thought it was cool the way they switched art styles when they did
yeah,
flashback, and it wasn't even just flashbacks because the flashbacks, kind of in a third person way, were just
right.
very similar to the rest of the art. But
Mhm.
when Michelangelo or April was specifically giving their story, it was a completely different style. It was like a
Yeah,
black and
and
white, which wasn't that kind of like the original comics.
yes, that was gonna say that was the original art
Okay.
style for the comics. Yeah, completely black and white. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was a fun detail. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and I did enjoy the brutal violence because I feel like what like you said that most other adaptations have kind of watered it down,
Yeah,
more sanitized it.
yeah, they said
Um,
yes.
Whereas in this, there's like, yeah, we're just slicing people up. It's no big deal, you know.
Right.
I thought that was cool, and another aspect I found really interesting was they really leaned into the ninja aspect of the
Yeah,
turtles, which I
yeah.
feel like falls to the wayside a bit in most
Hmm.
versions. You know, it's still in the name, but they really don't do much ninja stuff besides training, you know.
Right,
But
right.
this really leaned into, you know, the Japanese origins, you know, and culture and everything.
Hmm.
I thought that was cool. There is a game coming out soon, which was kind of what reminded me
Yes,
of this. Well, I don't know
yes.
how soon because they just released a teaser a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
But it seems like they're still in the early stages of development, so it's probably going to be a couple years.
Right.
But just the fact they're making a game could be really cool. Um,
Yeah.
Especially I think that whole aspect of his brothers kind of being in his head the whole time. I feel
Yes.
like that could provide some fun gameplay where you know the other turtles are kind of talking at you while you're playing the game, you know.
Mm,
And I think it could
right.
be a cool blend of stealth and an action game,
Yeah.
depending on how they do it. And yeah, I think it does have potential. I just hope they do it well.
Right, right.
Honestly, I'm kind of thinking of going back and reading the originals sometime soon. So,
I was thinking about the issue with that is that they're all kind of like one shot, so it's not like an
uh,
arc. So it
okay,
might be difficult to cover on this podcast, although we might be able to figure it out if it's popular enough.
sure, yeah. Let us know in the comments if you want us to try covering the original Turtle comics.
Mhm.
But yeah, before we wrap things up this week, what is your cultured pick?
This week I picked up Big Game number 2. It is the continuation of Mark Miller's
Right.
big crossover.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this issue, it really sets the like the stakes of it because like Nemesis is gonna go around killing all the superheroes and like
Yeah.
it really sets up really early that like nobody is safe and like anyone could like die at any moment. And so it
Mm.
sets up the stakes really well.
Okay.
And there's this really fun scene where um, so like the Kingsman organization, they intercepted the
Oh,
some
they're in it
transmission that
too.
said, yeah,
Nice.
that some transmission that Nemesis is going to kill all the superheroes. So then you have Eggsy is now like protecting Hit Girl, and so they have some fun back and forth. That's really fun to watch. I guess fun
Hmm.
to read. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. There's a lot of stakes that are set up, and yeah, I'm really excited to see where the story goes.
Huh. That sounds like a really fun crossover. I didn't realize that many. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess it makes sense. It's everything Mark Miller's created, right?
right, right. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
How new is that?
It's still coming out. Like the
Oh,
second issue
okay.
just came out on Wednesday. Yeah,
So they're just okay. Cool. All right. Yeah, I might have to check that out. That sounds fun.
yeah. It's a lot of fun.
My cultured pick this week is Night Terror's Robin #2.
Okay.
Both of these Robin issues have been pretty interesting because both Tim Drake and Jason Todd are kind of
Right.
experiencing the same nightmare together.
Mhm.
And it's kind of fun to see them. Well, I say fun, but I think interesting is a more appropriate word to see them kind of
Sure.
battling their nightmares.
Hmm.
And you know they kind of have to figure out how to work together, and they're actually
Right.
able to wake up kind of on their own,
Okay.
which is interesting. I'm not sure if that ties into the wider story. Like, they wake up as soon as everybody else does, but it seems like they're the only two at this point. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's just pretty fun. And there's like his Red Hood. Jason has to battle like kind of an army of like giant like Slender Man versions of like the original Red Hood.
Ah,
Like the Joker Red Hood.
yeah.
It's this stuff like that's pretty fun, and Tim has to grapple with not being able to save his dad from being killed by Captain Boomerang.
Ah,
So yeah, it's just pretty interesting. Honestly, all the Night Terror stuff has been pretty cool.
yeah.
But yeah, that is the episode for this week, everyone.
It is.
This has been the Cultured Pull List. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to help support us so we can keep bringing you more great content, check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show's specific tier. A huge thank you to all of our current Patreon supporters: Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., and Salib K. I have been your host, Michael Malillo. My co-host has been Luke S. A big thanks to Jose Navarro, who designed our logo and all our visual assets. Thank you again for joining us. If you liked this episode, please like this video and subscribe, and share the show with your friends. If you'd like to check out The Cultured Nerd on social media, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left. And if you would like to check out Casual Experts, me and Luke's other brand, including our podcast Casual Experts Only, which is also a part of the Cultured Nerd Podcast Network, you can scan the QR code on the bottom right.